All right, welcome back everyone to the deep dive. We're diving into something pretty crucial today if you're working with anything in Microsoft's cloud, and that's Azure Active Directory, Azure AD for short. It's like the gatekeeper, deciding who gets in and where they can go.
Exactly. And chances are, if you're using, Office 365 or Azure itself or Dynamics 365, you've already brushed up against Azure AD. It's kind of baked into those services. What we want to do today is really break down what Azure AD is, why it matters, and how it's different from that classic Active Directory some folks might be used to.
Right, because we're seeing more and more companies moving towards the cloud. So understanding this shift is key. This deep dive, think of it as your guide to how Azure AD makes accessing all your cloud apps easier and how it really beefs up security in your cloud space.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so slide 1, Azure Active Directory, Microsoft's cloud identity solution. The name kind of says it all, but what are we really dealing with here?
Well, from what I've gathered, Azure AD is Microsoft's multi-tenant, cloud-based directory and identity management service,
Yeah.
primarily designed for those IT administrators out there.
You hit the nail on the head with multi-tenant. That's a biggie. Instead of every company needing their own separate infrastructure, it's more like everyone's in a big shared building. Microsoft takes care of the building itself, making it way cheaper and simpler for you to have this seriously robust identity system without the headaches of managing every little detail yourself.
Okay, I see. So it's like a managed service. Makes sense. And it's not just a behind-the-scenes tool for IT, right? I mean, how does it affect everyday users?
Great point. For everyone using these services day to day, Azure AD provides that single sign-on, the SSO we hear so much about, meaning you use one login for tons of different cloud apps. Think Office 365, Salesforce, Dropbox, Concur, you name it. No more juggling a million different usernames and passwords.
That is a lifesaver. I mean, I can't even keep track of all the logins I have as it is. And what about the developers out there, the people building these cloud apps? How does Azure AD come into play for them?
Huge advantage for developers, too. Instead of them having to build their own identity and access management systems from scratch, which is a massive undertaking, they can just integrate their apps with this well-established, globally recognized service. Saves them a ton of time and effort and ensures a certain level of security and trust from the get-go.
So it's a win-win for everyone involved, really. Now, for folks who are already using some of these Microsoft cloud services like Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, or Dynamics 365, am I right in thinking they already have an Azure AD instance?
Absolutely. It's automatically included with those subscriptions. It's part of the package deal.
So it's kind of working behind the scenes, even if people don't realize it. Okay, that brings us to slide 2. Accessing and navigating Azure AD. So it's already there. How do people actually find it and see what's going on in there?
The Azure portal is your gateway. It's at portal.azure.com. If you're already familiar with Azure, this is your central control panel for pretty much anything Azure related.
Right, so you're in the portal, but then how do you actually get to the Azure AD section?
Usually you'll find Azure Active Directory right there in the left-hand navigation. It has its own section with all the settings and whatnot. But if you're the kind of person who knows exactly what they're looking for, you can always use the search bar at the top. Just type in Azure AD and it should pop right up.
Makes sense. And once you're in there, what kind of things can you actually do? What can you manage within Azure AD?
It's pretty comprehensive. You can set up single sign-on for your applications, customize the company branding that shows up on login pages. You can manage policies for all the devices accessing your stuff, oversee user accounts and their permissions, set up group-based access controls. It's pretty much mission control for managing who has access to what in your cloud world.
Wow, that's a lot. And just to reiterate, if you're already on those Microsoft cloud services we mentioned, you've got a tenant already set up waiting for you.
Exactly. That's your organization's dedicated space within Azure AD.
Okay, so it's managing stuff.
Okay.
But slide 3 gets into the key benefits of Azure Active Directory. For someone who's using these cloud services, why should they care about what Azure AD brings to the table? Like, what's in it for them?
Okay, well, let's start with this. Azure AD plays nice with pretty much any platform. It's not limited to Windows. It works great with iOS, macOS, Android, you name it. In this day and age where everyone's using their own devices for work, this kind of flexibility is essential, right? Got to make sure everyone can access what they need no matter what they're using.
That's so true. It seems like everyone has a different device these days. But then how do people actually get to their applications when they're using Azure AD?
There are a bunch of ways. There are personalized, web-based application panels. Think of it like a custom app store just for your company's approved apps. You can also access apps through mobile devices, directly within Office 365 if you use that, or even through custom company portals that your IT team might have set up. The beauty of it is no matter where you are or how you're trying to access an app, you just use your regular work credentials. One login for everything.
That's got to be a relief. I remember the days of having a separate sticky note for every single login. Not fun, but okay, it's convenient. But what about security?
Oh, security is a big one. Azure AD has these built-in identity protection features. What's really cool is it gives you a central view of any weird or suspicious sign-in activity and flags any potential vulnerabilities related to user identities. It's constantly learning and evolving to spot threats.
So it's not just managing identities passively. It's actively looking for anything that seems off and could indicate a security problem.
Oh, exactly. It analyzes login patterns, locations, devices, all sorts of things to detect and send alerts about potentially compromised accounts. And like we touched on earlier, it doesn't just handle cloud applications, it can also work with your on-premises applications for that secure single sign-on.
So even those older apps that companies have running internally can benefit from Azure AD's streamlined login and security features.
Yes, through a few different integration methods that Azure AD supports. And the sheer number of apps it can connect with is amazing. We're talking thousands of those popular SaaS solutions like Salesforce, Workday, DocuSign, ServiceNow, Box. All those tools everyone's using these days.
That's quite the ecosystem. All right, let's move on to slide 4, understanding Azure AD concepts. This one gets a little more into the weeds, but to really get how Azure AD ticks, we need to understand some of the lingo.
Absolutely. So first up, a thing that can be authenticated. Sounds kind of vague, right? But it basically covers anything that needs its identity checked. Could be a person logging in with their username and password, but it could also be an application or a server proving its identity using, say, secret keys or digital certificates.
So it's not just humans. It's anything within the system that needs to be verified.
You got it. And closely tied to that is an identity with associated data. The takeaway here is that an account, the thing you use to log in, is always linked to an underlying identity. The identity is like the digital representation of that thing we talked about, with its own specific attributes and permissions.
So it's like the who or the what that's trying to get to a resource needs a digital ID card within the system. Makes sense.
Perfect analogy. And that leads us to Azure AD accounts, sometimes called work or school accounts. These are the specific identities that get created and managed directly in Azure AD or through other Microsoft cloud services your company might be using.
So let's say your IT admin creates a new employee account in like the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. That's actually creating an Azure AD account for that person.
Bingo. And all those Azure AD accounts live in something called an Azure AD directory. Think of it as a secure, dedicated database that holds all the identities for your organization. It's created automatically when you sign up for any Microsoft Cloud service.
And then there's the term tenant. We hear that a lot when talking about Azure AD. So what exactly does that mean in this context?
A tenant is essentially a representation of a single organization. So when your company signs up for one of those cloud services, you get your own little isolated, secure Azure AD directory. And that directory holds all your organization's users, groups, and registered apps. It's like your company's secure digital container within Azure AD.
Okay, that's helpful. So a tenant is your organization's private space within Azure AD where you manage all your own digital identities and access policies.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's your own dedicated environment for identity and access in the cloud.
All right, let's move on to slide 5. Azure AD versus Active Directory domain services. This is a big one, especially for folks who've worked with a traditional Active Directory. So how does Azure AD stack up? What are the key differences?
Yeah, this is where it gets a bit tricky because the names are similar, but they're actually built for different purposes. Traditional Active Directory domain services, or ADD, particularly when you see it running on an Azure virtual machine, is really an extension of your on-premises Active Directory. It's all about managing resources within a traditional network domain.
So putting ADDS on an Azure VM is more about moving your existing on-premises setup into Azure's virtual environment.
You got it. It's still focused on managing computers and users on a defined network, often relying on network-based protocols for communication. Azure AD, on the other hand, was built from the ground up for the internet and cloud applications. Its main way of communicating is over the web, using standard HTTP and HTTPS.
Okay, so one's built for the traditional network and the other for the modern internet-based cloud. What about the actual methods they use to communicate?
ADDS usually uses LDA, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. It's like a language computers on a local network use to talk about users and resources. Azure AD, being web-centric, relies on REST APIs over HTTP and HTTPS. It's a newer, more internet-friendly way for different systems to communicate.
And the authentication process. When someone tries to log in, how do these two actually verify that it's really them?
Traditional ADDS relies on Kerberos, a very secure but sometimes complicated protocol tied to the network domain. Azure AD uses more modern web authentication methods like SAML, WS Federation, and OpenID Connect. These are like standardized handshakes that let different web applications securely verify who you are without needing your login info directly. It's a better fit for how spread out and diverse cloud applications are these days.
Gotcha. Now, any IT team's going to be concerned with how much effort it takes to manage these systems. How do they compare on that front?
This is a big difference. With ADDS on an Azure VM, you get all the traditional management work that comes with Active Directory, plus the work of managing the virtual machine itself. So things like deploying the VM, configuring Active Directory, installing security updates, managing backups, it's a lot. Azure AD, since it's fully managed by Microsoft, takes that all off your plate. They handle the underlying infrastructure, keep it updated, and make sure it's running smoothly.
Sounds like a lot less stress for IT.
Definitely. Plus, Azure AD can connect and trust third-party identity providers like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google. That's not something ADDS can do easily without a lot of extra work. For users, it means potentially using familiar logins from other platforms, which can be a nice perk.
That's useful if you're working with external partners or clients. They can just use the logins they already have.
Right. One last difference is the structure. ADDS uses a hierarchy with things called organizational units and group policy objects to get really specific with managing users and computers. Azure AD is flatter. It doesn't have those same concepts. Instead, it relies more on grouping users and using what are called conditional access policies.
So they're both about managing identities and access, but designed for different worlds, traditional networks versus the modern cloud.
Exactly. And they can even work together in a hybrid setup where a company has both on-premises and cloud stuff, but knowing their differences is crucial to using them effectively.
So let's move on to slide 6, Azure Active Directory additions. It sounds like there's a lot Azure AD can do. Is it a one-size-fits-all thing, or are there different versions?
Good question. Microsoft actually offers several different editions of Azure AD, each with its own set of features and capabilities. It's all about fitting different organizational needs and budgets. The most basic one is the free edition.
Free.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you get with that?
Even the free version has some essential identity management features. You can manage users and groups, sync up your existing on-premises Active Directory with Azure AD, get basic usage and security reports, and importantly, it's got single sign-on for a bunch of apps, including Azure, Office 365, and lots of popular SaaS apps. It's a good starting point for organizations moving to the cloud.
Sounds like a decent amount for a free service. What's the next step up?
Next is the one that comes with Microsoft 365 apps. This builds on the free version and adds features specifically for managing identities and access for Office 365 apps. You can customize the branding on login pages, enforce multi-factor authentication for extra security, manage group access to Office 365, and enable self-service password reset.
So this edition is really tailored for those using Microsoft 365.
Exactly. It's all about integrating and securing that suite of apps. Then we move up to Premium P1. This is where you start to see the features for managing hybrid environments for companies that have stuff both on their own servers and in the cloud.
What kind of features does Premium P1 unlock?
Well, it has everything and the free and Microsoft 365 apps editions. Plus, it adds seamless hybrid user access so your on-premises Active Directory and Azure AD can work together smoothly. It also has advanced administration features like dynamic groups, which automatically add or remove members based on rules, and self-service group management, so users can sometimes manage their own group memberships. And it includes Microsoft Identity Manager, or MIM, which is a tool for more complex identity management scenarios.
Sounds like a big step up for organizations that are bridging the gap between on-premises and the cloud.
It is. And finally, we have the most feature-rich edition, Premium P2.
What's special about Premium P2?
Premium P2 builds on all the previous editions and adds really powerful security features. This includes Azure AD Identity Protection, which provides risk-based conditional access, so you can set access policies that adapt based on how risky a sign-in attempt looks. For example, if someone's logging in from a weird location, it might trigger a need for multi-factor authentication. It also has Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, which lets you keep a close eye on admins with high-level access and give them just-in-time, temporary access to those sensitive roles.
Okay, so Premium P2 is for those companies that need top-notch security and have to meet strict compliance rules.
Absolutely. Each edition adds more features, so it's all about finding the right fit for your organization's needs and security requirements as you move more towards the cloud.
All right, on to slide 7, Azure AD Join benefits. We talked about Azure AD as the identity service, but now what is Azure AD Join and what's so good about it?
Azure AD Join is this feature that lets you directly register devices, like laptops and tablets, with your Azure AD tenant, without needing to join a traditional on-premises Active Directory domain. This is great for organizations that are cloud-first or have lots of remote workers who aren't always connected to the company network.
So instead of joining a device to a local server, it's linked directly to Azure AD in the cloud. What are the main advantages?
For one, users won't have to deal with as many login prompts when accessing work stuff. Because the device has its own identity in Azure AD, it can do single sign-on more seamlessly, even when the user's outside the company network.
That's a huge plus for those of us who work remotely a lot.
Right, just makes things smoother. Another big benefit is enterprise-compliant roaming. This means user settings and preferences can roam between different Azure AD joined devices without needing a personal Microsoft account. So it's a consistent experience, and the company can still manage those settings and keep things secure.
So it's a consistent experience for the user, and the company still has control over things like security settings.
Exactly. Azure AD Join also gives you access to the Microsoft Store for Business, where organizations can pick out a list of pre-approved apps for work use. Users can easily find and install those approved apps using their Azure AD accounts.
Oh, that's a smart way to handle software deployment and licensing in a cloud environment.
Absolutely. And lastly, Azure AD Join supports Windows Hello, which lets you access work resources securely using biometrics like facial recognition or fingerprint scanning. It's a nice, modern, and passwordless way to log in.
So Azure AD Join makes things easier, but it also bumps up security. Makes
Correct.
sense. But I got to ask, because it's a little confusing. Slide 8, device management, registration versus joining. Azure AD Join sounds a lot like device registration. What's the difference?
It's a subtle but important difference. Device registration is a simpler way of connecting a device to Azure AD. You register it, and it basically gets a digital ID in Azure AD. This ID can be used for authentication when someone logs into Azure AD from that device. It also gives admins some basic control, like enabling or disabling the device's access to Azure AD resources.
So registration is about getting the device recognized by Azure AD.
Exactly. Device joining goes further. When you join a device to Azure AD, it not only gets an ID in Azure AD, but it also changes the device itself. This is key. It lets users log into the device using their work or school account, not a personal Microsoft account or a local account.
Oh, I see. So with Azure AD Join, your work account becomes the main way you log in and use your device, tying it more closely to your organization.
Right, and that tighter integration unlocks more management options, leading to what's called enhanced management. This is where you combine Azure AD Join devices with a mobile device management solution, or MDM, like Microsoft Intune.
How does that combination improve device management?
When a device is both Azure AD joined and managed by an MDM, Azure AD gets a whole lot more information about the device, things like its compliance status, configuration settings, and what apps are installed. And you can use that information to create really specific conditional access rules. So for example, you could say a device has to meet company security policies before it can access sensitive data. This gives you way more control over the devices accessing your organization's stuff.
So registration is like introducing the device to Azure AD, while joining is like making it a full-fledged member, especially with MDM, for more control and compliance.
I like that analogy. Joining integrates the device more deeply, opening up more sophisticated security policies and a smoother experience for users accessing company resources.
Security is definitely a top priority here, so let's talk about slide 9, multi-factor authentication, or MFA. How does Azure AD help organizations set up this essential security measure?
MFA is crucial these days, and Azure AD makes it easy to implement. The basic idea is to make users prove who they are with more than just a password. We usually categorize these verification factors as something you have, something you know, and something you are.
Okay, let's break that down. What's an example of something you have?
It's usually a physical item the user controls that's not easily copied, like their smartphone getting a notification, or a one-time code, or physical security key.
And something you know is the one we're all familiar with.
Yeah, that's stuff the user has memorized, like their password or answers to security questions.
And lastly, something you are.
That's biometrics, stuff unique to the person, like a fingerprint scan or facial recognition.
So instead of just relying on a password, MFA requires a second layer of verification, like a code sent to your phone or a fingerprint scan.
Precisely. Azure MFA protects your company's data and apps by requiring that second form of authentication. This dramatically reduces the risk of attacks from stolen passwords, which are a major cause of data breaches these days. MFA also helps companies meet various security standards and regulations.
It seems like it adds a lot of security without being too inconvenient, especially with options like those push notifications.
Exactly. The idea is to make it both secure and user-friendly. It also does real-time monitoring, sends alerts if there are suspicious login attempts, and it works well with lots of cloud apps, including Office 365 and Salesforce. It's especially important for protecting admin accounts, which could cause major problems if compromised.
So even if someone gets a hold of a password, they'll still be stopped if they don't have that second factor like the user's phone.
That's the power of MFA. It layers the security, so it's way harder for attackers to get in because they'd need to compromise multiple things. All right, let's talk about last slide, slide 10. Self-service password reset, or SSPR. Passwords, they're a pain for users and IT. How does Azure AD's SSPR help with that?
Oh, tell me about it. I've lost track of how many times I've had to reset a password.
Yeah, it's a common problem. SSPR lets users reset their own passwords without bothering the IT help desk. This can really cut down on those password-related support calls, which are usually a big chunk of IT's workload. It frees them up to handle more complex issues.
So it's a win for everyone involved. How does SSPR work from the user's perspective?
Basically, users can start the password reset process themselves online without calling IT. Admins set up SSPR in the Azure portal and decide who can use it. They can enable it for no one, specific groups, or everyone.
What are the different ways users can verify who they are when they're resetting their password?
There are a few options that admins can enable. You can get a code emailed to a recovery email address, get a text message with a code, a phone call, or you can answer preset security questions. It's flexible, so people can use whatever works best for them.
So admins have control over which methods are available and can adjust them to fit their company's needs and security policies.
Exactly. Admins can also decide how many security questions users need to set up and how many they have to answer correctly to reset their password. It's generally a good idea to have multiple verification methods enabled just in case one isn't available.
Makes sense. If you lose access to your phone, you need a backup.
What about admin accounts? Can they use SSPR too?
Interestingly enough, Azure admin accounts can always reset their passwords through administrative channels, no matter what the SSPR settings are for regular users. This makes sure admins can always get back into the system if they forget their password.
So it's like a fail-safe for those all-important admin accounts. So SSPR gives users more control over their passwords and makes life easier for IT.
Right. It streamlines the password reset process, gets users back into their accounts quickly, and lets IT focus on other important tasks.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today in our deep dive into Azure Active Directory, from its basic definition as a cloud identity solution to all the advantages it offers, like single sign-on, stronger security with MFA, and empowering users with SSPR. We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully this has given everyone a better understanding of how crucial Azure AD is in today's cloud-focused world.
And remember, for many of you listening, Azure AD is already a part of your daily work, even if you don't always see it. So here's something to think about. How could a deeper understanding of Azure AD's features and the different editions available help your organization be more secure and create a smoother experience for your employees using the cloud? We encourage you to check out the Azure portal, take a look at your Azure AD settings, and maybe even compare the different Azure AD editions to see what fits your specific needs. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.